Victim was what is known as a protected person under international law. After Russian forces invaded Milivay, the victim was abducted from his home by three of the defendants, Mukurchian, who was one of the commanding officers, and Valery and Nazar, the lower-ranking soldiers, and their co-conspirators. During the abduction, we allege that those defendants threw the victim to the ground while he was naked, tied his hands behind his back, pointed a gun at his head, and beat him with their feet, their fists, and the stocks of their guns. We allege that they forced him into a building that Russia-affiliated forces were using as a jail and into a closet that they were using as a jail cell. We allege that as they interrogated him, they tortured him. They beat him again with a gun. They punched him in his chest and stomach. They threatened to shoot him. They stripped off his clothes and took pictures. One of their conspirators threatened to sexually assault him. And during the interrogation, when the victim's answers did not satisfy the defendants, we allege that Budnik, who was also a commanding officer, threatened the victim with death and asked for his last words. We allege that Nazar and other conspirators then took the victim outside. There, they forced him to the ground, put a gun to the back of his head. The victim believed he was about to be killed. They moved the gun just before pulling the trigger, and the bullet went just past his head. After the mock execution, the victim was beaten and interrogated again. At one point, he was told through an interpreter that he was, quote, going to sleep. And he was told by Mukurchian, quote, good night, leading the victim to believe again that he was about to be killed. During his 10 days detained by Russia-affiliated forces, the victim in this case was tortured, threatened with sexual assault and execution, forced to perform manual labor, and beaten in the head, chest, and stomach with the soldiers' feet, their fists, and their guns. Again and again, he believed he was going to die. These charges against 4 Russia-affiliated military personnel are the Justice Department's first criminal charges under the U.S. War Crimes Statute. They are also an important step toward accountability for the Russian regime's illegal war in Ukraine. Our work is far from done. I want to recognize the criminal divisions, including the Human Rights and Special Prosecutions Section and the War Crimes Accountability Team, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Eastern District of Virginia, the FBI, and the Department of Homeland Security, including Homeland Security investigations. Their diligent and skillful work is what made these historic charges possible. I also want to recognize the incredible courage of our partners in Ukraine, specifically our counterparts in the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office. In the midst of war, Ukrainian prosecutors and investigators have risked their lives to pursue justice for the Ukrainian people. We are honored to stand alongside them. Finally, I want to recognize our partners in the international community. We will continue to work closely alongside them to gather evidence and build cases so that when the time comes, the United States and our partners will be ready to ensure accountability for Russia's war of aggression. This is an historic day for the Justice Department that builds on a long history. The War Crimes Accountability Team prosecuting this case is modeled in part on the Justice Department's decades-long effort to identify, denaturalize, and deport Nazi war criminals in the United States. During that effort, the Department's Office of Special Investigations brought more than 130 cases against perpetrators of Nazi crimes. In the vast majority of those cases, the perpetrators were not identified until decades after they committed their horrific crimes. This history should make clear that the Justice Department and the American people have a long memory. We will not forget the atrocities in Ukraine, and we will never stop working to bring those responsible to justice. Throughout our work, we will continue to put our trust in the rule of law. The rule of law is the best answer we have to crimes that cannot be truly answered. The rule of law is how we pursue true accountability for the individuals responsible for those crimes and how we deter future aggression. And the rule of law is how we pursue justice in a way that protects people and protects our shared humanity. I'm now honored to turn the podium over to Secretary Mayorkas.
Thank you very much, Attorney General Garland. In 2008, the Department of Homeland Security and its Homeland Security Investigations, or HSI, created the Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center, the only U.S. government entity focused entirely on investigating these global atrocities. For 15 years, this select group of special agents, attorneys, intelligence analysts, criminal research specialists, and historians from across the federal government have worked together and with their international counterparts to hold those who engage in the perpetration of war crimes, genocide, torture, and other human rights violations accountable. Today, an investigation more than a year in the making by this center and its federal partners bears fruit. For the first time in our nation's history, federal agents gathered sufficient evidence to bring charges of war crimes perpetrated against an American citizen in violation of Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 2441. The allegations, which the Attorney General has described, detail gruesome events. The agents who made this case possible were tireless in their investigation, giving extraordinary attention to every detail and making considerable sacrifices throughout. In August 2022, these HSI agents traveled with their DOJ and FBI partners to speak with an American citizen who had recently been evacuated from Ukraine, where he had been living with his wife. The U.S. citizen told our HSI agents how, a few months earlier, he had been violently abducted from his home in the village of Milove by members of the Russian armed forces. He told HSI investigators, as the Attorney General noted, that these Russians had stripped him naked, threw him face down to the ground, tied his hands behind his back, pointed a gun at his head, and severely beat him, including with the stocks of their guns. The Russian soldiers then took him to a nearby Russian military compound and held him there illegally for 10 days. He reported that while in forced captivity, he was subjected to 2 interrogation sessions, during which he was tortured by the 4 defendants named today. He reported that the Russian defendants had again stripped him naked, photographed him, and severely beat him about the chest and stomach. One defendant staged a mock execution of him. After asking for the victim's last words, one of the defendants named today forced the victim to the ground, put a gun to the back of his head, and pulled the trigger, purposely missing the victim's head by mere inches. Throughout this past year, our HSI agents, with the assistance of HSI's Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center and alongside our FBI partners, have worked to corroborate the victim's allegations. They traveled internationally to interview the victim's family. They identified and interviewed individuals who were present within the general vicinity of Milove around the time the victim was held in captivity, who confirmed the Russian forces' occupation in the area. Based on the information they obtained, the HSI agents and their FBI partners were able to identify the 4 defendants whose indictments are announced today. I am extraordinarily proud of these federal law enforcement agents. Thanks to their exceptional work, the United States will hold the Russian perpetrators of this unthinkable mistreatment, these unacceptable human rights violations, accountable. The work of these agents and the indictments unsealed today speak to 2 fundamental truths. First, there is no higher responsibility of government than to safeguard its people and their basic human rights. As today's announcement makes clear, when an American citizen's human rights are violated, their government will spare no effort and spare no resources to bring the perpetrators to justice. Second, the evidence gathered by our agents speaks to the brutality, criminality, and depravity of Russia's invasion. The Ukrainian people have had and must continue to have America's full support against Russia's unjust, unprovoked, and unlawful war of aggression. We cannot allow such horrific crimes to be ignored. To do so would only increase the risk they will be repeated. It is now my honor to introduce Chris Wray, the Director of the FBI.
Thanks, Elliot. Good morning, everyone. The FBI's mission is to protect the American people and uphold the Constitution here at home and around the world. And today, together with our partners, we are once again fulfilling that mission. The charges unsealed just a few minutes ago reveal absolutely unconscionable crimes, including unlawful confinement, torture, and other inhumane acts committed against one of our own citizens by 4 individuals affiliated with the Russian military. That American, like so many others, became a victim of Russia's unprovoked invasion of Ukraine, which continues to wreak unimaginable tragedy on the region. Caught in the crossfire of a war he had no part in, this American was tormented for days at the hands of these defendants. And today's indictment demonstrates our commitment to our mission and our resolve to seek justice for all Americans, even amidst the fog of war. Though today marks the first time the War Crimes Act of 1996 has been charged in U.S. history, this is certainly not the first time the FBI has investigated war crimes and held perpetrators accountable. Cases like this one are among the most complex the FBI works, but bringing them is essential to deterring crimes like these and showing would-be perpetrators that no one is above the law and that war crimes will not go unpunished. I want to thank all the men and women of the FBI who supported this investigation, including those in our Washington field office, the International Human Rights Unit within our Criminal Investigative Division at FBI headquarters, our legal attaché offices in Kyiv, Warsaw, and Moscow, and our victim services personnel. They have all played crucial roles in this investigation. The charges we're announcing today would not have been possible without our valued partners, both within the U.S. government and our allies overseas. So I also want to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude to our colleagues who work these cases at the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security for their collaboration and partnership. No agency can do this alone. This is a team effort, and I am confident that because of the partnerships on display here today, we have achieved a team victory, not just for this victim and for the American people, but for justice around the world. For decades, the FBI has been working to keep Americans safe from the many threats that Russia poses. Whether it's human rights abuses like those laid out in today's indictment, espionage targeting the U.S. government and our most sensitive information by Russian intelligence services that have not been shy about even murdering those they dislike worldwide, cyber attacks against our critical infrastructure in the hopes of bringing our daily lives to a halt, or transnational repression through which the Russian government tries to silence its critics on our own soil. But no matter the threat, no matter how heinous the crimes, the FBI will be there to protect U.S. citizens. And as you can see from today's announcement, we will work relentlessly to bring criminals to justice, no matter how long or how far that work may take us. Thank you. And now I'll turn it over to Assistant Attorney General Nicole Ardrey-Cherry.
Thank you, Director Wray. The charges announced today, the first under the federal If you're just now tuning into Live Now from Fox, on the left side of your screen, we are live in Washington, D.C. as war crimes in Ukraine are being announced right there, all of the charges and the crimes in detail. On the right side of your screen, we're following the very latest of the Israel-Hamas war. Both boxes out there in Gaza, that bottom box you can kind of see as the night sky illuminates red, showing those missile strikes as they continue at this hour. Hello to you. If you're just now tuning in, I'm Jeanne Francine, joining you this Wednesday morning. It's 10:33 on the East Coast. Let's go to a quick 2-minute commercial break. When we come back, getting right back into these live events impacting you. Welcome back to Live Now from Fox. I'm Jeanne Francine. Let's head back inside the Justice Department as they're giving us the very latest information addressing those war crimes in Ukraine.
Heard was a civilian non-combatant who lived in the village of Milove in Kherson Oblast in southern Ukraine. Per the indictment on April 2nd, 2022, just last year, the defendants allegedly abducted the victim from his home in Milove and took him to facilities functioning as a Russian armed forces controlled compound. The defendants and their co-conspirators are alleged to have held the victim against his will for approximately 10 days, and during that time, the defendants and their co-conspirators allegedly beat, tortured, and interrogated the victim using brutal and unlawful methods, including, as we've heard, striking him with their fists, their feet, their guns, threatening sexual violence, holding a knife to his throat, and forcing him to endure his own mock execution. As alleged, the defendants certainly intended to inflict severe physical and mental pain and suffering upon the victim with their actions. So these 4 defendants are charged in the Eastern District of Virginia with conspiracy to commit war crimes and war crimes alleging unlawful confinement of a protected person, torture, and inhuman treatment. These charges reflect that the defendants' alleged actions are not only grave breaches of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilian persons in time of war, but also violations of United States law. We at the Eastern District of Virginia are proud to stand with the Criminal Division as part of the Department of Justice's efforts to hold perpetrators of war crimes violations accountable in Ukraine and elsewhere, and we will continue to pursue them. We do want to thank our investigative partners in this case, the War Crimes Accountability Team, the FBI Washington Field Office, and Homeland Security Investigations for their outstanding efforts to gather evidence required for these complex and novel charges. Thank you. I will now turn this over to Stacey Barrera from ICE.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Acting Deputy Director Stacey Barrera for U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. As many of you know, Homeland Security Investigations is a directorate of ICE and the principal investigative arm of the Department of Homeland Security. Our special agents in Washington, D.C., and those with HSI's Human Rights Violators and War Crimes Center worked closely with FBI and the Justice Department's Criminal Division to unravel the information that brought us here today. I'm extremely proud of the work done by HSI along with FBI to secure these indictments. HSI cannot and will not stand by as war criminals commit heinous acts like those alleged in this case. Our agency will continue to do what it takes, and that means everything within our extensive legal authorities and investigative capabilities to find and prosecute people who terrorize innocent victims under the pretext of war. We will continue to hold war criminals accountable by putting them behind bars. We're committed to making an example of criminals who violate international and U.S. laws, just as we are doing in this case, to prevent others from going down the same path. With that said, I'd like to extend my most sincere thanks to the FBI and the Department of Justice for their partnership, to Secretary Mayorkas for his unwavering support of HSI and ICE, and all the hardworking HSI personnel who have put in hundreds of hours piecing this case together. Thank you.
I will take questions.
two questions, one on topic, one slightly off. How many more of these can we expect? You said, I think, during your visit to Ukraine earlier this year that you were investigating a number of cases. Should we expect anything more in the coming months? And then I'll follow up.
So I can't get into too many details, but this is our first, and you should expect more, yes.
On an unrelated topic, the Speaker of the House yesterday, in announcing the release of video taken from January 6th, said that he had blurred some of the faces because he was concerned that the Justice Department and the FBI would prosecute individuals potentially. Do you think that was an appropriate thing for him to say, and do you have any response?
Look, the Justice Department only prosecutes those people we believe commit crimes. I am extremely proud of the men and women of the department who are working every day to hold accountable those who committed crimes on January 6th. They will continue to do so.
Do you think it's inappropriate, though, for a constitutional officer such as the Speaker of the House to essentially say that he didn't want the identities of people shown so that they couldn't be prosecuted?
All I can speak for is this constitutional officer, and that is we will prosecute people who commit crimes.
Next question, David Scott.
First for you, Attorney General Garland, then for Director Wray. This is your first war crimes charge. You said there would be more. Where are you on war crimes relating to Hamas?
Look, so Hamas murdered and more than 30 Americans and kidnapped more during their terrorist attack on October 7th. We are investigating those heinous crimes, and we will hold those people accountable.